now. So for anybody who is not able to make it, we will be able to share this with them. So good afternoon or morning, depending where you are. And thanks for being here. Today is our second informational webinar for the Small Wind Turbine Research Project, sponsored by FedEx. Today, we're going to be doing a couple of different things. The first thing is that we're going to just do a quick around the room with who's here to hear quick updates on where you're at in your research, maybe working with your mentor or anything exciting about your outreach that you've been doing. So just quick updates. Then we're going to get into talking about the Distributed Wind Energy Association conference that's coming up in February, where you all have been invited to present your research results. And then we're going to turn it over to Charles Newcomb, who is going to talk to us a little bit about wind resource assessment and maybe have some hints about how to use that darn power predictor that we sent you that has been such a pain. Maybe. Charles just got his like a couple weeks ago, so he's still learning it too. But that's the plan for today. So with that, I'd love to just kind of go around the room and say hi to everybody. And like I said, if you want to give like a quick, like 1 minute update on something cool that you guys have been working on, that would be fantastic. So how to do this? I am going to call the first person on my list, and then that person gets to call the next person. So hopefully, so you have to put the next person in front of the fire. So I see Jay Sant in front of me first. So if you want to say hi and then pass the torch to somebody else.
Hi, how's everybody doing? I'm Jay. I'm from UMass Amherst. I'm joined by our advisor, Jim LeGrant, and then two of my teammates, Ryan Sullivan and Jack Drummond. So we worked on a system to remotely monitor, test, and evaluate wind turbines. So we used the turbine from Primus and got a bunch of industrial commercial sensors and kind of measured some parameters of interest. So we researched failure modes of these turbines, what we wanted to pick. We ended up doing wind speed, blade RPM, power output, and tower vibration. That was what we thought was most important. And we put all these into a PLC and then to a cloud-based storage system where we accessed it remotely. And we actually took first place in our senior design competition. So we were pretty excited with that.
Congratulations. And just a spoiler, we will want to be doing a story about you all in that that competition there. So I will be in touch.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, if you want to hand it on to somebody who's not on your, sorry, Jay, if you want to hand it on to someone who's not on your team, we'll hand it to another school to say hi.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just go to the cell below me. Charles Newcomb is the one right below me.
Look at that. I'm Charles, and I've been in the industry for a bit, and I get to work with Remy and support her in repowering schools, and it's really nice to see all your faces. We're excited to have you thinking about wind, and we really hope you join us in the industry.
Pass the torch.
And then I should pass it on to, well, this is the problem, Remy. You're the next one down the list for me, and that doesn't work. But let's go with Jack. Drummond.
You're on mute, dude.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Jack. I'm with Jay and Ryan on their team. So yep, I think you pretty much covered it, but yeah.
I chose poorly.
Yeah. I'll go with Lena.
I'm Lena. I'm from Rutgers University. I'm with Professor Todd Rossi. Fortunately, he's not able to make it to the meeting, but we're just here for the logistics of the meeting for February. So whatever help that you guys need.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lena. Did you have any rough numbers for us yet?
No, I did not.
Okay, no worries.
We'll talk for tomorrow. Okay.
Yep. We got time. Awesome. And if you don't mind passing it to the next person.
Sure. I have Kathy.
Hey there. So this is Kathy Jackson from Northern Oklahoma College. And then I have one of our team members here, Matthew. So I'm going to hand it over to Matthew and let him kind of share.
Hi. So what we kind of been working on right now is we've had multiple obstacles that we had to overcome. But right now, what we're working on is behind me. We like built a wind tunnel so we can test the silent X's cut in and cut out speeds. Um, but it's still a work in progress. We're doing all of our data collecting tonight. Um, I'm here working on something completely different. So. Um, Other than that, we have our weather stations out there set up. I can't really say exactly where, but we have them. We're monitoring them almost every day. So it's still a work in progress.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
And then looking forward to seeing everybody out in Washington.
Yay.
Yay. So I'm going to pass it on, and I see Robert Connolly.
Hello, everybody. I hope I'm being heard clearly. I'm Robert. I'm a graduate student at Appalachian State, and I've been working with Dr. Sohad and Dr. Podell with our turbine. And we kind of just got it set up, and we got the power predictor, plugged in. But the neat thing about our turbine is it's right near a little kind of mobile lab that has PV panels and batteries there too. So we're excited to see if we can kind of hook that up and make a little mobile lab for other classes to kind of work with and learn from.
Fantastic, Robert. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And next on my list is Brandon Tidwell.
Hey guys, my name is Brandon Tidwell. I'm with FedEx and just excited to hear about the conference coming up and share a little bit of details and a potential request later on in the meeting.
Awesome. And I think Joe, or maybe is the last on the list. Did we cover everybody else? I think so. Joe, did you want, I can't hear you.
Or something.
Hi, I'm Joe Moltoff from Donnelly College. We had our environmental science students this fall assemble the turbine. They learned all about the turbine and how they work. They watched various videos on it. We had the students research and look up battery information to see, what kind of battery they would need. So the appropriate batteries. We had them scout out various locations on our campus, which would be more suitable. We kind of came up with the idea to put them on, put casters on the turbine and make it portable so we could roll it around. This spring, we actually we're incorporating this turbine and the use of turbines in our curriculum for our environmental courses. So it's going to be quite interesting this spring. Students will be collecting data all spring long. They will be doing journaling about their results. They'll be giving presentations during Earth Week. And we'll open that up to the community. We did have a couple roadblocks in the way. We kind of had supply chain issues getting a battery. So that was one of the issues. I've hired an engineer to help me with the wiring because I'm not very good at that. The students will be taking a pre and post activity surveys, and we'll get a lot of data there too. So that's what we're doing.
Wonderful, Joe. Thank you so much. And Jim, I know your student said hi. Do you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. Very, very proud of the work that the team did, and I'm looking forward to meeting folks in person in DC at the end of February.
Awesome. And I'm noticing, Ian, you're here, and then I just saw Kimberly joined. I don't know if the two of you would like to just say hi and introduce yourselves.
I'll say hi. Sorry, I don't have the camera on right now, but my name is Kimberly. I am a student at NOC on the wind turbine team, and Kathy let me know that this is going on. I wanted to be a part of it and say hello.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here. Ian, you want to say hi? Okay. well, when you're back at your desk, we'll say hi. So thank you guys for those quick introductions. I wanted to just give a couple of quick project updates and reminders. As of now, everybody has received their turbines and their power predictors and all the fantastic FedEx stuff that Brandon sent us. So thank you, thank you. Just know that we are working on the survey. I don't know if you remember, but we were going to ask you to share a survey with some of your local schools to get some feedback on what a good renewable energy demonstration project would mean to them, kind of in preparation for that next research project that we talked about. And that survey will be coming out later this month, but just know that that's still a thing. And we can, answer questions around that if you have those. Just another reminder, we are not going to be requiring a final research report from the teams. I know you all are probably writing up formal research project reports. You're welcome to share them with us, especially just for feedback, but it is not required. But we will be gathering a summary of impact through like a Google Forms survey that we will send out in March. So after the conference and everybody has participated, later in March, we'll send out that final impact survey. It's going to ask questions about your research project, your mentor relationship, your outreach, things like that, challenges, that kind of stuff. And that's kind of the quantitative part of what we're going to gather, and it's going to be pretty minimal, so don't worry too much about that. But then FedEx, and Brandon can step in here and talk about more detail, but I think we would really like to be able to share some more anecdotal stories about your research experience that we can really share online to boost the program. And so Brandon, I was going to turn it over to you to maybe talk a little bit more about that. Were you ready for that?
Thanks, guys. Do you mind giving me permission to share? I sent you the slide that I'm going to share right now, but if you can just give me quick permission.
Yeah, sure. You should be good to go.
Right. Well, welcome everybody. We really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm talking with Remy. One of the things that we often get from a lot of the nonprofits or organizations that we support are really nice detailed reports, but they end up sitting on a shelf, and they don't really become good content for us to share. And so we think these are great stories. And so I actually took the example of Amherst. By the way, congratulations on winning first place. That's awesome. But this was a really good, I think, starter for a story, right? So it provided some good information. It reads a little bit like a news release, which is lovely. But what we really like to hear is maybe one of you on each team willing to take on just writing a short story, 250, 350 words, preferably third person with a student and a faculty quote included if possible. But the most important thing here is how do you make it personal? So like talk about what your process was like, or one particular student's journey through the research project, or what some of you want to do in your future career plans and how this has helped to be that. The third piece is like, I please hear me out. I am not looking for folks to write anything like, thank you FedEx for that. That's not what I'm asking for. But I am saying like, by having tools like this wind turbine and research grant from Repowering Schools, we were able to do X, Y, and Z. So it's really about sort of what is it, that resource that Repowering Schools provided you, and how did that get you more opportunity for access to research and learning. So again, we're not in a rush to get these. By the end of the spring semester, before finals hit, would be great. And we'll obviously go through make sure we've got your approvals, Remy's approvals, and any university approvals that are requested before we post it. But if you want to, you can go to fedexcares.com. We have lots of stories on there that kind of give that look and feel of it. One of the things I would also like is a photograph. I didn't put that in there, so I apologize. But one of the Amherst team sent us 3 great photographs. I chose this one as an example. This is a great photograph because I can see faces. There was one they sent me where they're all working and hunched over a bench, and I saw their backs. Not helpful. So when you're thinking about a photograph to reflect your team's work, do make sure it has like faces in person, so it makes it personable as best possible. So Remy, do you have anything else to add? I just wanted to be quick about that.
No, I think that's perfect. And thank you for that. I think just the biggest thing is think, social media, right? We don't need long stories. We need short shareable stories, and quotes are fantastic and pictures are even better. So just I thought that was a nice summary, and it's here in the recording. I can even share the slide with you so that you have all those details in front of you if you need to share it with teammates. That'd be really helpful.
Great.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for that. And let's see. So next we're going to talk about the details of the upcoming conference. I just have to get back to where we were. Okay. Sorry. There we go. What did I know? Okay. So upcoming Small Wind Student Symposium to be held at the Distributed Wind Energy Association Conference on February 27th through March 1st. This is taking place at the Residence Inn Arlington Capitol View, which is in Arlington, Virginia, which is right outside of DC. And so what we have been planning is more of like parallel programming that will go on during the DWIA conference. So as you're thinking about your plans to attend, just know that you do not have to register for the DWIA conference. You're here for a separate event, the Student Symposium. You don't need to register for DWIA. They have invited us to participate in the DWIA sessions for Monday. If you would like to, there's some interesting sessions from small turbine manufacturers. There's going to be some lightning rounds. There's going to be some market updates. Charles is leading a session. So it's going to be a nice informational day if that is of interest to you, but it's very kind of market related and not going to be like super science engineering background stuff. So it's up to you if that is of interest. And you can find the full agenda on the DWIA conference website. And I did not put the link in here, but I should have. But we can maybe, Charles, I don't know if you have it at your fingertips and could throw it in the chat or something. If you want to look at what Monday has in store, welcome to participate in those. Our programming is going to happen in parallel on Tuesday of the DWIA conference. Our plan is for the morning session to be focused on bringing in industry folks to present to you on topics that you find interesting. And so we are trying to gather some idea of what kind of topics would be of interest to you. And Sohad, I think you were maybe brainstorming on this. I didn't know if you wanted to chime in here with any ideas.
Yes, good morning. Hello, everyone. I sent those emails and I got minimal responses, but I would say the main thing is that anything that might help the student to be prepared, or like a heads up if they are planning to work or they like to work in the wind industry, that would be nice, you know. And you know, it's a question that a professor can't probably answer, or it's better answered by industry, like the status quo, you know, where are we going regarding, you know, economy and economics of, you know, what are the main challenges. If there are technical challenges, that would be brilliant. Otherwise, any economic, or that would be also nice. So those are probably the main things that were brought up during discussions. Yes.
Awesome. That's a fantastic. And while we're here, if any of the students who are here or faculty members would like to chime in with any other ideas off the top of their head, I will be taking notes. Nope.
Remy, I'm dropping in the market report just because it's just like, that was such a great question, is like, what's the industry doing? And the Lawrence Berkeley does a very nice, has been doing it for ages, a market report that kind of gives you a perspective on who's in the industry, how big is it, not about jobs so much, but like, where's the industry going from a power energy generation standpoint, and how's it competing with solar and natural gas and those kinds of things. Really helpful. So if you haven't seen that, there's a in the link below.
Thank you for putting that in there. Yeah. And yeah, and that's the other thing, is that I know that this is a distributed wind conference. The turbine that you guys have been working on is a small distributed wind generator. But that doesn't mean that our conversations on a Tuesday morning need to be limited to distributed wind. We could talk, we have experts at the ready, especially if we want to consider a virtual option of bringing in folks who can talk about, offshore wind, if that's an interest, or other things. So please think wide while we have, industry at our fingertips.
Question, Remy, how much context do people have regarding what distributed wind is and who the players are? Do people have a sense of that, or would a 1 minute kind of a Reader's Digest version of that be helpful?
I say go for it.
Okay, so distributed wind has the one thing that distributed wind has in common with, or maybe the two things with the utility scale or regular wind, if you want to call it that, is number one, it is a wind turbine, and generally they're governed by the same laws of physics. So that's what they have in common. And that's kind of where it ends because it's sort of like a small organic farmer with a 20-acre patch or something like that, and agribusiness. So they are that different. And so what you're getting at this conference is people who are in a really scrappy little industry. The industry has been kind of on the fringes for a long time, despite the fact that there are thousands and tens of thousands of turbines out there. It's always been kind of it's a consumer product, often thought of that way. That's being challenged more recently. And if you look at where the main megawatt hours are coming from, they're not coming from small wind turbines anymore, because you put in one utility scale turbine behind a Walmart or a Budweiser, and it kind of, it rules the show. It will generate the same power as, 1,000 little turbines, right? So that's an important thing to understand. But the fun thing is that the people that show up at this conference love the industry. These are people who have chosen to stay in this size for the reason being that they like the consumer and they like the challenge. I'm going to say, because they're gluttons for punishment, I don't know, but they like the challenge of distributed wind in that you're really working in the trenches. And that's from a scrap economics perspective, means in obstruction land, below so many things around you. These things aren't on 300-foot tall towers. And then small technology that doesn't have the kind of, somebody said Primus. It's not Primus. There's the other one, the Pica, was a turbine that was out for a little while. And it had like 80 SCADA channels on it or something ridiculous. But generally speaking, small turbines have really limited data coming off of them. And so that's another piece, is like they're just trying to intuit what's going on. So these are like people who sail little sailboats. That's another analogy versus a huge container ship. So that's just something important to know, that a lot of the people who are going to show up at the conference are technically really savvy and smart, or they've been in it for a long time. The industry has been around, who knows when it started, but we can call Mike Berge as kind of the sole survivor of going back to the 80s. And he's done that by just sticking to his knitting. He really hasn't really expanded his portfolio of offerings very much. And so a lot of the other people are like that, and that they just stick and they do these small turbines and they love it and they work really hard at it. So that was longer than a minute. I'm sorry.
Sorry, this is Ian, and I got my mic fixed. One thing I would add to what Charles said is that when we think about distributed wind systems, it's any turbines that are not connected, generally speaking, to a transmission line. So it's connected at the distribution level. And as Charles was saying, that can be a small wind farm connected to a co-op distribution network in Iowa. It could be 2 megawatt turbines installed behind a manufacturing facility at some town in Kansas. It can be a turbine on a farm, and it can be a turbine on a sailboat. So all of those fit within this kind of definition of what we're calling distributed wind. And although there is not a lot of it, if we are looking to transition to a clean energy system, and there are studies that the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has put out looking at this, you need a whole lot more wind to install to be able to do that. Like 10 times what has been installed currently in the United States over the next 15 years or so. And if you look at the market potential, offshore wind is great, but you only install a little bit in the next 15 years because the economics don't work. We don't have a manufacturing base, and it costs a lot to do that, and it's a slow ramp. There are plans to put up a lot of large wind farms, but that requires transmission access, and we're pretty well limited on transmission. And so what it says is that where you can put wind is in these distributed applications, because we are installing these turbines closer to loads on the distribution network, and so you bypass the transmission infrastructure. So if you're looking at careers that in the wind sector that will play a key role in getting to a clean energy economy, obviously encourage you to go into offshore wind or or land-based wind. But distributed wind is an area that is really robust for development because it doesn't rely on a manufacturing infrastructure that doesn't exist in the country, which is what you need for offshore wind. And it doesn't rely on lots of transmission, which we need for large land-based wind farms. And so it's an easy market to get into and have impact really quickly. And this conference is a great opportunity to engage with the people that are doing it. So sorry, sales job there a little bit, but it's a great opportunity for students and faculty to get hands-on with the industry. And so I'd encourage anybody who can to come and attend. It would be great to see you there.
Yeah, thank you, Ian and Charles, both. I think that's a great overview. And the other thing that I think is interesting about this distributed wind network, you know, and this conference is that we're going to see a lot of manufacturing there too. And so don't forget, when you're all in engineering, you know, so working on turbines, but the manufacturing side of things is really interesting when it comes to the small wind systems as well. So we'll continue to work through bringing in some industry presentations for the morning. We'll have a networking lunch on Tuesday. Kathy and I have been talking about putting together a career panel. We might be sending an email out to some of you students, because I think the idea was, wouldn't it be interesting to see a panel where we have industry and students together talking about career needs? So what do industry need in terms of employees, but what do you all as hopefully recent graduate or new graduates need in terms of careers? So could be a really interesting topic over lunch. In the afternoon, we're going to allow you all the opportunity to present to each other about your current research. So somewhere in that 10 to 20 minute range, depending on how many schools are attending, we'll be able to present to each other about their research findings in a low risk environment and get some peer evaluation. And then in the evening, we'll have a cocktail hour, and you guys will be invited to put posters out that summarize your research findings for industry. So two different audiences, right? Presenting to each other, and then posters to talk to industry. And I'll get into more details on that. On Wednesday, we're working with Brandon to develop a field trip for you all to learn a little bit more about FedEx and its sustainability program. At this point, we're thinking the Government Affairs Office in DC, but we're still toying around. Brandon, I think you said that things were still up in the air, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything else about that.
Yeah, we're our company's having our board meeting in DC this week, so we weren't able to go to ask them their head down on that. So I have a couple of options I'll discuss with you next week.
Sounds great. We will keep you updated, but just know Wednesday will be a field trip of some sort, and it'll be fantastic. So, and I will send these slides out to you all. Okay, there we go. So we don't have to go through this in so much detail, but I figure in terms of the posters, y'all would have questions as to what should a poster look like. Just think like a basic research poster. You know, title, team members, school logo. We'd be happy to provide you with the Repowering Schools and FedEx logos if you want to mention us on your poster. Excuse me. But I think just really putting your research objectives, methods and procedure, and results and conclusions and some next steps on there. You know, basic scientific research poster. I am thinking in terms of size, a minimum of 24 by 36, like a 2x3. If you want to print it bigger, that's fine, or format it for a larger size. My goal is to have three-sided backboards for us to clip these to, because we'll have easels to put them where you're not going to be able to tape things to walls. So if you've got a curly poster, I'm going to give you something flat to clip it to. But so I wouldn't go any bigger than 32 by 47, just kind of a random size, but that's the size of a three-sided backboard. We'll provide the easels, the backboards, and the binder clips for you to display them. So you can print them, roll them, bring them with you. If you do not have the means to print a large format poster, by all means, just send me a PDF of your formatted poster and I will happily print it for you here at JMU. Don't let that be an obstacle, but we would love to. And for those of you who are not able to attend, you're still more than welcome to send a poster, and we could put it up and show off your research, even if you don't have a student who's able to stand in front of it. So just throwing that out there. In terms of the presentation, I know that Todd Rossi from Rutgers was kind of helping me think through this, and we may have more details as we kind of move through this. But again, these are the presentations you'll be presenting to each other. You can present as a team. I would aim for somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes of presentation with some time for questions. In terms of what to present, again, basic presentation, you know, a title slide that's got all your information on it, your a nice summary of your research project. But I really want this to focus on more of the other aspects of what you guys have been doing, your mentor engagement experience, your outreach event that you have done or planning to do. We'd love to hear about some challenges and how you've overcome them. And then, you know, we may come up with some other topics, but I think this is kind of a good outline to start with, and we can continue to send you updates on what this looks like. And if there's a need for a PowerPoint template, we can do that. You just let me know what is needed. And then lastly, we are still trying to get RSVPs from all of the universities and colleges to make sure that we know who's coming. And if you and your students are planning to come, how many are coming, and if you are going to be using the DV block of hotel rooms, because they need to know if they've got enough rooms blocked up as we're adding to their numbers. So there is a Google form. And I can maybe put the link in the chat again while Charles is speaking. So if you want to fill it out, these are not hard, fast. Like if you tell me you're going to have 5 people coming and then 6 show up, not a big deal. I just need to get an idea of where we're at. And so it's not written in stone. And also remember that we do have $250 per team in the budget to help you to get to the conference. So that'll be in the form of a travel reimbursement. So you'll fill out a reimbursement form, send receipts to me, and then I will reimburse you. I prefer big things like a hotel room as opposed to like 5 Ubers and 3 taxi rides. No, so the big ticket items are the easiest things to reimburse for, but I will need a reimbursement form and receipts just to kind of have backup for those things. Up to $750 per team. And if you have questions, totally can go over that later. But we're running low on time, so I do want to turn it over to Charles to start talking about wind resource assessment. If you've got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, or I can take a couple right now if anybody has some questions for me. Clear as mud. Love it. Okay, Charles, they're all yours.
All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop one of my favorite PDFs in the on sort of pre-construction estimates. It's a little bit deep, but it's just so fun, and it comes out NREL. So that's in the chat. I encourage people to just download it and sort of scan through it, because it gives some really important background on kind of losses, net, taking a gross estimate down to a net. Okay, so we're going to jump into this real quickly, and as typical for me, I often do kind of the fire hose thing, and I apologize for that. So just do your best to hang on, and then Remy, you'll circulate this afterwards so that people can. Okay, great. All right, so I think the first thing is, like, we're not out here as meteorologists, trying to understand the weather. We're trying to understand the resource for a specific reason in wind energy. We're trying to come up with an estimate of like, is this a good site? Is it going to make decent amount of energy or what? So it's really about, we got to summarize and characterize a resource in order to do that. But the real thing is about developing some sort of a production estimate. That's what we're here for. And there's, the gross is like very simple, like just I've got there's a standard out there for how you test turbines and understand what their performance looks like. It's the 61400-12 IEC standard. And in there, it says, well, one of the things we have to come up with is a little AEP table, and an annual energy production table that says, under these wind speeds is how much energy you're expected to get. That's a gross number, for example. And it's based on typically a method of bins approach, which you guys will know about. And if not, we'll cover it briefly here. The next thing is sort of like, then you can say, well, then there are some obstruction losses. So the notion is that, I've got a gross estimate, but then the question is like, that's based, how much should I deduct based on the wind resource coming in from certain directions through certain obstacles? Because that's kind of a ground level net. And then there's a net with terrain considerations, where there's speed up and there's slow down, right? And there's also, you guys are engineering students and you've probably done your fluids and things like that, and you understand turbulence and you understand tripping, and you understand that flow will stick to the surface until you trip it into turbulence, and then it'll kind of like do its own thing. So those kinds of loss estimates are getting more complicated, and often they're modeled. So they're in something like WASP or Wind Farmer or whatever the tool is, the fancy tool. And there's even one out there which is now free, which is Continuum. Liz Walls, thank you, that was close. So Liz Walls did this as a business of hers years ago, and then she was so generous when she wasn't doing that business anymore to make it available to us. So it's actually kind of a tool, a neat tool that does speed up and slow down. And then there's the net based on other losses. So these are turbine downtime, these are electrical losses through the distribution system, these are service downtime, whatever it is, breakdowns, those kinds of things. So that's the idea, is kind of coming up with a production estimate. There's a couple little notes down here that I made. One is air density normalization. So some of you are at sea level, I feel like it, like Rutgers isn't very far above sea level. Oklahoma, you guys are, I don't know, 1,500 feet above sea level, so I'm guessing. But then there's people like Appalachian State, you guys are kind of high in the mountains, I feel like. And you have to be careful that whatever measurements you take, you do normalize down to some atmospheric, if we're trying to do an apples and apples comparison ever. And so you're trying to get to that 1.225 kilograms per meter cubed number and doing your normalization for that. Second thing is turbulence. So depending on where you are, if you have a really laminar site, and the best example I ever saw with this was where we had an OEM who was like, this is a 400 watt wind turbine. Actually, it's the predecessor of the turbine you all have. And they would get 400 watts, and they had a whole power curve and everything else. And then we would take it and test it at NREL, and we get 300 watts. We're like, what's the difference? They're like, I don't get this. It's not an elevation problem, because they're testing in Flagstaff, the same elevation pretty much. And it turned out they're truck testing it. So they would put it on a truck and they drive around. And what's the turbulence intensity of a vehicle driving through the air? 0%, right? Unless it's gusty or you're following something else. So that's a huge difference. So control systems systems that respond differently in different turbulence, that's an important consideration to take. And then the equipment, last one, that's another fun example of, it wasn't the predecessor of the turbine you have, but it was a little 500 watt wind turbine. No, it was a predecessor. It was a 300, and they had a specific blade chemistry that when it got humid and wet, it would turn into a noodle. And so it would just prematurely feather and regulate. And then they'd send it back to the factory, and then they'd run it, and it would be fine, because by the time it got to the factory, at 5,000 feet, it would dried out and it ran perfectly. And then they'd send it back to the customer. So it's really important that the equipment be representative of both of the whole suite of equipment that's out there, but also of the environment where you're going to be running it, that kind of thing. Okay, so quick one, sources of data. When we think about resource assessment and doing an annual energy production estimate, there's different sources. So you can measure it, which you've got the power predictor for. That's great. And then there's also models. So models come in different forms. There's wind maps, and NREL put out a whole bunch, and they're still up there on the Wind Exchange. And that just gives you a number, a wind speed. And that's pretty simple. But you can do something with it. You can screen. You can say, I'm in a place where there's going to be some production, or I'm going to be in a place where I may as well be in a cave somewhere. So that's important for screening. And then there's reports, and we'll cover this real quickly. And then and reports are sort of the output of the wind map, which is not just wind speed, but sometimes wind direction, sometimes a shape factor, to give you the sense of the probability distribution function. And then there's reanalysis outputs. And so there are people who provide this for you. Reanalysis, and we'll talk about this very briefly, is just this global weather model, and it can be weirdly useful. And then there's virtual metmass, which is a value-added product on a reanalysis output. So it's as if you put a metmass there, and it's saying the reanalysis data set might be at 20 or 30 kilometers resolution. Oh, that's not very useful. But then it's downscaled using some sort of, numerical weather prediction model like WRF or something. And then it's taken, you put terrain in it and obstructions and things like that. And the virtual metmass will integrate all that and give you an hourly value. So that's of real value if you're trying to do something that's a little bit more accurate. Met towers, again, we can start with met towers where it's just single point measurement, single direction. That's better than putting it on your house if it's on a tower. But then you can also say, hey, we have them at different heights. So you can put met equipment at different heights so you can get a sense of shear and veer, how the wind is changing with elevation or height above the ground, et cetera. There's, of course, remote sensing. So these are sort of stealthy devices that are really inexpensive to deploy and capture the wind resource pretty well. And then there's other things. So like other data, whether it comes NREL, for example, if you wanted a data set, you can go to their M2 data site and download 10-minute data for any period of time. And so that's really nice. And Texas AMU, UDing down there has made some data sets available, which is great. And if you need data sets, just let us know and we can point you to those. So there's that. This is from Remy. Thank you, Remy. And it's the JMU. They do a number of assessments for people in the state of Virginia. And this is the kind of thing where they say, okay, here's the map. Here's how you read the map. Here's the wind speeds. And here's the wind rows. So you guys, I'm assuming, know what a wind rose is. And that's just that's a probability distribution function in a conical plot. And so it gives you a sense of how, where is the wind coming from? So that's important when you start to think about obstructions. Another version of the wind report would come from AWS. It's when you log in, if you pay your subscription or you do a day pass or something, you can get into this is UL now. But it's the old AWS TrueWind site, and they'll give you again. Here's where it is. Here's the wind speed roughness estimate. Not that the roughness is right or wrong, but that it's how they did it. That was their assumption, right? And so then you can adjust. If you say, hey, my roughness is different than that, let me use a different factor, and then you can adjust accordingly. Air density, so you can kind of get a sense of, oh, where is this thing? This is not at sea level. Don't worry about the power density. I mean, some people know what to do with that. There's a little bit of uncertainty. That's useful. And then a shape factor or two, and then the wind rows. Now, this is a wind rows for the entire year, so it's somewhat useful. We don't know the intersection between the incidence of the wind speeds and the month of the year or anything, so that's a little less useful than monthly wind roses, for example, or hourly values, or the kinds of things that you'll get out of your power predictor. And then there's a monthly wind speed. So it gives you a sense of how it changes over the year. So again, you could do a monthly energy estimate, couple that with a standard wind rose, one wind rose, and it's better than a single point. So quick question, when we're talking about this modeling data, where does that come from? What is reanalysis? Some of you guys will probably know, but it is this global assimilated model that is pulling in data from, they'll say, tens of thousands of data points. So it's all the ASOS, the surface observation stations, airplanes, often Rawans on balloons that are flying around, satellites, et cetera, ships. there's just so many data points, and then the system temporally synchronizes them all. So it knows where the measurements are, and it knows all the conditions everywhere. And then the global model draws the line between all the data points and says, this is what's happening. And that can serve as a very powerful boundary condition when you're doing other downscaling from that. And so downscaling is where you take it and you've got kind of a big scale, and you're integrating terrain, maybe a little bit of roughness, maybe a little bit of directional variability, and you're doing a CFD at that level, and you're getting a map that is down to like these guys out of Bristol, UK, will bring it down to about 5 meters. So it's a 5-meter cell. That's crazy accurate, or not accurate, but crazy specific, granular. And AWS will take you to 200 meters. So there's a huge debate over whether it's better to have, to have false security around a 5-meter value, or is it better to say, hey, let me do the work myself and just get a 100-meter value, that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of differences. But the way that I think about it is that it depends on the type of project, and depends on the complexity of the terrain. So if it's really simple and there's no directional differences, like Kansas or Oklahoma, if you get out of town, and you go out into Enid or something like that on the Panhandle, it kind of doesn't matter which direction it comes from. And I could probably just give an average wind speed and a shape factor, and you're going to be really close, right? But in other things, when you're around buildings, or there's complex terrain, you better have a more sophisticated model than that. And when you're talking about really complex and different shear, and you're talking about actual money for a real project, then you're going to, of course, do something a little more sophisticated. So what are you doing when you're summarizing it? The simple one is like mean wind speed. Then you can do the shape factor. Then you can do the wind rows. You can add complexity to it if you want to add more confidence in what you're doing. And then you get to this pro level. This is what happens when you've paid somebody $25,000 to go out and put a tower up, and then you spent $50,000 for a couple of years of monitoring. And they're getting multiple levels, they're getting all the stuff that allows you to normalize the air density and everything else. And then turning it into an estimate, there's different ways. So I talked briefly about the AEP table, and then you can just interpolate that in there, because the AEP table is very linear, and well, at least it's smooth. Based on a higher wind speed gives you more production. And it's very simple, and it's a way to match it. A lot of OEMs will do this. Then the method of bins, where you've actually got wind speed information about the probability distribution function for wind speed, so you know how many hours at what wind speed. It's most common. It's very common. It's a common way of doing it. But depending on how complicated you want to make it, it can either be accurate or less accurate, depending again on the level of obstructions, etc. And then simulations. This is like an hourly simulation where you say, hey, at this wind speed, I expect this power output, and I've got a direction at this hour. And so now I can come up with my shear across that direction at that hour. And I know whether there are obstructions, and I know what the kind of losses, etc. And so the hourly simulation, of course, is going to be the big dog. And that's how you do it in Windographer or other things. The AEP table looks like this. So this would come out of a -12 report. And you can turn that in a little table, do a little curve fit, and you can do the same thing in terms of a power curve. The best way to do a power curve is not, it doesn't make a huge difference, because you can just do a binned power curve, like 8 meters per second, 8.5 meters per second. I get this much power out of it, etc. Or you can do a segmented polynomial. So you can say between 0 and, it's good to say like 6 or 7 meters per second, somewhere in that inflection point. That's one polynomial. The next polynomial takes you up to the top of the curve, and the last polynomial is out the end. And so that will allow you to take a wind speed in a simulation that's not in the center of a bin and get a much more accurate number. So there's different ways for improving that. This little section down here, and Remy, I sent you a few files that we could circulate. This is one of the files, and it's just a super simple shear estimator or a wind speed across different heights estimator. And it's using that, log, height, shear, etc. So that's kind of a nice little tool, because whatever you do, you have to take the wind speed at the measurement height and adjust it to the turbine height. That's a really important first step. You can't just say, hey, I've got a 100-meter map, and it says 7 meters per second. That's great. And now I'm going to put my turbine at 10 meters. Like, that's a really different wind speed, and it matters that you adjust it down. Quick overview on the method of bins. You've all seen this. It's the power curve and then the wind speed distribution, and you're multiplying the power in a specific wind speed, and then you're integrating that over the whole range of wind speeds. The method of bins looks like this when it's in a spreadsheet, and you guys have probably even done this. If you haven't done this, I'll drop in, or actually, Remy, if you can, or somebody can, if you just Google Berge.com, and then you go to their technical, I think, and then you go to their, there's a CAD performance model, and it is the simplest thing. So I'm going to drop this link. I wonder if that didn't work. But anyway, I love the Berge performance model because it's so easy. I think I can copy the link and drop it in the chat somewhere if I can find the chat. Oh boy, the chat moves around, doesn't it? Chat. There it is. Keeps disappearing. Sorry. All right. Oh, there's a link in there. So you can, you can get down to this pretty quickly. In terms of simulation, that might look like this, where you have, a date and you have an hour and you have a wind speed at that point, and then you're coming up with the expected power, and you're summing that up over the 8760. And there are tools to do this, or you can create them by yourself. A quick few words about obstructions, because we're running out of time. But, normally, I mean, if this were a 100-meter tower and a big wind turbine, you'd be like, look at those cute little houses. They're like Monopoly. But when you're a distributed wind turbine, which in fact, if we zoom in here, these are actually 3 sky streams. And they're, they're on 50-meter or 50-foot towers or something like that. But there's a 25-foot tall barn in front of them. And so this is one of the kinds of things where it matters where you put the wind turbine. You shouldn't put it behind the barn. So how do you know that? And what does that look like? And there's, the nice thing is in -12, there's a nice ag engineer in the 80s, Pereira, who last name Pereira, I never learned his first name, but who spent a bunch of time in a wind tunnel and did his PhD thesis around understanding the impact of the obstacles. And he was doing a hot wire anemometer and creating little obstructions. He was trying to figure out, how do you decide what's the right density and height of trees to make a good windbreak for your farm so the dirt doesn't blow away? Well, it just turns out that that's really a great tool for estimating obstructions. And then Joe Smith, I think I had this, worked at NREL for a little while, and he coded this up into a spreadsheet, which is really sweet of him. And so that's also been sent to Remy, and it looks a little like this, where you can plug in different heights at different directions, and it'll give you the loss based on your distance to it, because the things that matter are how far away are you from it? What's the kind of roughness between you and the obstacle? How tall is the obstacle? How tall are you? Those kinds of things matter. And so you can plug all that in. Oh, and the object porosity, of course. If it's a brick wall, it's pretty different from a tree. And then when you combine that with knowledge about a wind rose or data about the wind direction, which you'll have, this is a little tool that I put together so that, I could just take a wind rose if I didn't have the data and I didn't want to pay, for a deep report. I could just grab the wind rose. I could deconstruct it, and then I could put it into the spreadsheet. So about the power predictor, this is the tool. Remy, have you shared this with them yet? This spreadsheet?
Is this the power predictor? They should all have the power predictor spreadsheet.
Okay, because there's no more website. I mean, if you go to powerpredictor.com, like you've probably, tried to in this little thing, you're like, it's for sale. That's so handy. I think I'll buy myself a power predictor site. Yeah, it's not there anymore. So now it's like, okay, now what happens? Well, you can tune things here in terms of where you are and your assumptions, and then you can dump your raw data in, and including the directions. And then what you'll get out of it is, here's a little summary of the wind speeds over time. And it does the same thing as the Berge Excel CAD, where it's saying I've got a method of bins and I've got wind speed bins, and I'm going to give you the power at each bin, and then you can sum it up. But it's not really taking in, it does summarize direction, but it's not really doing much with it as far as I can tell. So it's an opportunity for improvement. And that's what's fun about spreadsheets like this, is you can take it, you can deconstruct it, figure out what it's doing, and then you can add the value, which is saying, okay, now I've got to win rows because I've got directional data, and now I can start to put losses into that, and I can get a much better estimate. And that's the fun part. And then this is that tool that I sent to Remy, and I think was it. And I've got 4 minutes to spare. We get into this, and that, what you guys all have gotten them and plugged them in, so you know what it looks like. But the big piece is like that's no longer available. So thank God for Remy and her spreadsheet, or Brent Somerville and
it's Bergie's. I guess I don't know who it's crowdsourced. How's it?
Love it. And that's the passion of the team. And I so appreciated what Ian said was, what distributed wind is. And the other thing that I would say about the distributed wind people is that if you ask people in small wind or small wind, let's say small wind, they understand a lot about their turbine. They understand the blades, they understand the generator, the shaft, the loads, all this kind of stuff. So they know from the tip of the blade down to the base of the foundation. Because it's small and they kind of have to. It's kind of like a carpenter knows how to build an entire house. But if you go to a commercial building, like an airport, let's say, and you talk to the person who's putting in the conduit, they probably know nothing about the foundation. And that's how it is in big wind too, is that you talk to the person who's the blade expert at Siemens, they don't know how the pitch system works. So that's the fun part about distributed and small wind, is that you get to kind of know the whole system. And there's no better example of this than Todd Hanley, who's out of Bergie, who's, he can design inverters. Like what? So just know that you're going to run into some really bright people over there. That's just kind of fun. Anyway, Remy, that's my 20 minutes or so.
That's perfect. Thank you, Charles. I hope that was helpful to you all with your power predictors and being able to find other data and other resources to help you take that data and do useful things with it. So I know that Charles is more than happy to field questions. It's the end of the hour. There's a couple of questions, we can field them now. Otherwise, Charles, if you want to store your email, I think your email was on that slide. But I'm sure he would be happy to take your questions via email as well, if you run across them. Yes, so Ed.
So we encountered little issue with that power predictor. So once we try to get the raw data, it shows something like encrypted data.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand how you would decrypt it without the website.
Exactly. So I have the spreadsheet and I have this unreadable data,
So let's crowdsource a solution on that. I don't know the answer to that. Mike Berge made it sound like, oh, that's easy. But I'm like, yeah, I don't understand it. So maybe that's something we should don't stop collecting data.
Because it's critical, if you don't have the weather, you can't verify the power curve. And then we're now looking at, placing a data logger and all that stuff from scratch, because that's the only solution, Okay. So I'm curious.
We can ask Mike. He may have us. Maybe we're just missing a step before the spreadsheet that we're just not privy to. But Mike Berge is definitely the man to ask that question. So if you don't have his contact information, I'm happy to forward on.
Please.
I think it's just Mike Berge or Mike. I don't know.
It is. It's Mike@berge.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if other teams, if they did solve that, they might done something better,
or maybe
this is NOC. We've had the same problem too, and so we've had to use other means to try to determine the power curve. Yep.
Now you know why we've been hesitant to send these up to a bunch of K-12 schools, because they would, if we can't figure it out, we're the geniuses, right?
We'll get it figured out, I hope.
It'll be great. We'll figure it out. Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and thank you, Charles, for talking with us about power predictions and wind resource assessment. I will share the recording. We'll share the PowerPoint. Charles, you said you sent your slides?
Yes, I did also email the slides to you.
And I will make sure that Brandon sends me his slide if I don't have it in my email already. But I promise I will do a follow-up email, hopefully tomorrow, to you all, so that you have these resources to share with the other students on your teams, and for those universities and colleges that weren't able to join us for the call. I'm just looking forward to seeing you guys. Hopefully as many of you as can come out to Washington in February. Anybody here? I know I've heard from NOC and App State. Joe, you told me that the folks at Donnelly were not going to probably be able to come hang out with us.
We won't be. Yeah, we won't be able to. Yeah.
UMass, are you guys joining us?
Yeah, we're trying to get all 6 of us down there.
Awesome. And then Rutgers, are you guys joining us? Or is anybody here from Rutgers still?
Todd had said he would. On it, right?
Yeah, we're just trying to get the numbers.
Oh, you're right. Sorry,
Yeah.
Lena. You're
That's
sitting right there.
okay.
Yeah, that's right. You guys are still mulling over, but it's good to know. And then do we have anyone here from the West Indies with Ray's group?
Hi, yes.
Hey, Ambika, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Do you guys
we are not sure if we will be joining you guys as yet, but we will let you know hopefully by next week.
That'd be fantastic. I appreciate it.
Okay, no.
Yeah, and I think that's everybody that I haven't heard from. But if I haven't heard from you, please feel free to fill out that form. I did send it to everybody up there at 2:35 p.m. That's the form. That's just asking for your RSVP. Again, not written in stone. The more data you can give me, the better it is for planning. And just email me if you guys have any questions, and I will let you go.
Totally fun. Can't wait to see you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Charles.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you,
Bye.
Rainey.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.